Miriam, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Catherine. So, hello, everybody. I'm Miriam Reinhardt, and I've worked with many of you before. And we're going to do a training about story submissions. And as many of you know, I get very excited about this. I think stories are one of the exciting things that you all do, and that you often don't realize how what you do every single day is really, really interesting. And doing a story just means telling us, giving us an example of one of your cases. It's like when you'll talk to a supervisor and say, oh my God, I got to tell you what happened the other day. This guy walks in and this is what happened and I had to do this and that. And of course there are a few mechanics you have to go through, and we'll talk about those. But those are the stories that we hunger for, and those are the stories that help us lobby, help us get funding, help us reach clients in the community, and help other people access health insurance. So really, your stories go a long way. Okay, Catherine, do you want to go on to the first slide? So why do we collect stories? So we collect stories for a bunch of different reasons. We educate the community through our stories. We illustrate problems in the healthcare system and help prevent other people from facing the same problem. So many of you work with a client, and what you're discovering exposes a problem in the system, in the insurance policy, or in some other aspect of the healthcare. Our stories convey the impact of our workers to stakeholders and potential clients, and stakeholders are funders. So our stories enable us to show funders what exactly we're doing and why they should fund us. And very importantly, our stories provide an advocacy tool to push push forward better healthcare and health outcomes. So CSS goes out and we try, we lobby, we try very hard to change health insurance policies and health outcomes and address health inequities. And one of the most powerful tools we have is your stories. We go out and we say, look what happened to Joe Smith in Albany County. And this is what happened. This is what we did to address it. It shouldn't happen. It happened to Joe Smith. It happened to 3,000 other people. And through your stories, we can actually change policy. Our audiences are clients, caregivers, other advocates, media. We'll talk about media later on, community leaders, and of course, legislators and other policymakers. Next slide, please. All right, we'll go through the next few slides very quickly. These are just sort of examples of, we use our stories go into newspapers, of course, or television or radio occasionally. Here's a New York Times story about us. Next. This is our, it's an old 2015 annual report. Each year we come out with an annual report. Some of you probably have had, hopefully a few of you have had stories in them. Each year we run, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 stories inside each annual report. The annual reports are something that we use very, very much throughout the year to help us to influence healthcare policy and to get funding. And some of the best stories are in there. They're stories that we get from you. Naturally, they're rewritten, and as I will often say, you're not here. I don't care if you're not great writers. We'll rewrite it for you. What we want are the stories. Next. Here's a brochure. Next slide, please. Social media, when the ACA was hugely under attack, we did a tremendous amount of tweeting and posting on Facebook and other social media, and we'll continue to do that as we near the election. Next slide, please. Community presentations. Some sometimes there's a great story and one of our clients, the clients themselves, will be asked to participate in an event. And like for anything else, they can always say no. Many people are interested. Thousands of people do not want to participate, but that's never a problem. But if they want to, it can be very helpful. Next. All right, many stories and cases can be turned into good stories. I truly believe that, and those of you who know me know that I will often tell you that. So many of the cases you work on can be turned into good stories without too much problem, but I'm going to give you a few examples of what the kinds of things we really like. Does the client have a compelling medical need or a condition that has been in the news? Well, I have to smile at that question because obviously one condition is in the news, 100% of the time. Many of you are seeing clients who have been affected by COVID-19 directly or indirectly. If you have clients who have suffered from the illness, we will be interested in those. If you have clients who have a loved one who has suffered and it's affecting them, their mother, their aging mother has come down with it and they have to take off from work in order to take care of her, and they don't have health insurance. Those are the kinds of stories that we're very interested in these days. And of course, if a client has been indirectly impacted, so many of our clients have lost work. So many of our clients find that their prospects for job employment are very poor at the moment. If they were elderly and they lost their job, their prospects are going to be even worse. So, whether it's COVID-19 or another illness, there are many times that a pressing a medical condition can really mean that the story is a particularly notable one. Are the financial stakes high? If you have a case where obviously if there's a $25,000 bill and the client is not wealthy, that's going to be a very high financial stakes case, and we'll be interested. If you could help that client, that's a wonderful success story. And sometimes, $1,000 for a low-income person could be just as challenging as $100,000 for a high-income earner. So keep that in mind. When people are truly worried about money and you can help save that money, that's very compelling. Is the client a member of an underserved community? There are many kinds of underserved communities. It can be people of color, people in remote areas. Think about that. We have clients who have a very hard time accessing healthcare because they live so far away and only one provider might be, within 100 miles of them. We're interested in stories like that. Or people with disabilities, people maybe with a rare genetic mutation that affects their lives, but no one's paying attention to it because it's so rare. So any of those kinds of things should trigger your instinct to say, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I should write up about this. Is this a common problem? Does the case highlight important healthcare issues? We often hear from you saying, oh God, we must have had a dozen cases in the last month about all these insurance plans denying for XYZ reason. All my, dental care can often be a real, a very common problem, and denial for so many dental issues. So there are many issues that are quite common, too common, and we can use these as an example of, look, this is happening to not just Judy in Niagara County, but it's happening to 200,000 people a year. Does the case show a fundamental problem that makes it all but impossible to succeed? Sometimes cases that don't get resolved happily can make excellent stories. Now, most of the time, you're going to be submitting success stories. That's obviously what we like a lot, and you're going to be the happiest with them. You helped the client came in, they were frustrated, they were sad, they were scared, and they left feeling much better, largely because of what you did. So, you know, that's what you guys do almost every day, and we appreciate that, and the stories you send demonstrate that. However, there will be times when you and a client realize that you can only do so much, and you fail, or you might succeed partially, but you won't be able to fix the problem entirely. So that unless the client is so angry at you that they don't want to talk, those cases can be written up too. Tell us about what happened to that client, and the client might be interested in sharing it because they have a vested interest and they want us to maybe fix the issue. And through their stories, we have a chance of fixing the issue. And finally, does the client have an interesting or unusual background? You know, anything that you think is interesting, tell us about it. You know, that gives stories color and complexion, and it goes a long way. Thanks. Next slide, Catherine. A few more examples. Were you able to resolve the client's problem, of course? Did they express gratitude? Were you able to make recommendations? Did your work affect your client in a favorable way? Did the case touch your heart? I always stress this. If you really like a person or something about your work with that person, there's a good chance that client will be willing to give permission for the story, and you'll be able to turn it into a fine story. Next slide, please. Next, thank you. So asking a client for permission. Ask a client with whom you have rapport. A satisfied client who is grateful to you may be grateful for an opportunity to help you or CSS. I cannot stress this enough. Many times, you know, you all have many clients. I've worked with many clients. At the end, they so often say, or throughout, God, I appreciate this. You're helping me so much. I didn't know anyone would do it. I can't believe you guys do this and I don't have to pay. All of that shows gratitude. And you can so perfectly interject and say, you know, we're so happy to do this. This is why we're here. We really want to help. You can always come to us. And by the way, we don't charge, but one thing we do ask, would you give us permission to talk to others and to tell them what happened to you? Can you give me permission to tell your story? And very often they'll say, okay, well, tell me about it. And all they have to do is sign a release form, which we're going to get to in a minute. But that's who you should be asking, clients with whom you have a connection of any way and a client who seems grateful to you. When, super important, do not wait. Do not wait. Cases end. People move on. No matter how grateful they were to you, a month later, they don't want to hear from you. It was just an episode in their lives. It may be your job, but it's not their job. They feel better. They have moved on. So please ask them right away. At the end of a case or before you say goodbye, make sure you discuss permission and just get that release form signed. And explaining why we need stories, that's very simply because you're going to tell them all the reasons we want them. Because this way they can help improve healthcare and we can get funded and therefore you can get funded. Speak to the client in person. That's not possible these days. Try to get a photo. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Next, please. I'm just going to go fast because I have a lot still ahead. Their story personalizes healthcare challenges, again, this is just a repetition. You can read this. Their story allows the client to be part of a larger effort to achieve better health outcomes and helps policymakers identify problems with the healthcare system. Next slide, please. All right, what we need from the client, we need two things. One is a release form, okay? We're gonna get to release forms. Release forms are the only thing that the client actually has to do. Everything else is coming from you, the advocate, so just keep that in mind. You've gotta get a signed release form. Quotes, of course, you gotta get those too, but the client is talking to you every single time. The client is emailing you or talking to you on the phone. Quotes shouldn't be that hard. If you're not sure, you can always ask them at the end. You can always say, you know, tell me, Leslie, you were talking the other day about how tough it was for you. Is it okay? You know, what exactly did you say? Because I want to be able to mention that when I write about you. And they'll say, oh yeah, it was so hard. I wanted to go on vacation. I didn't know if I could afford it. That's a good quote. And, you know, and then you, Ms. Case Handler, came along. Next slide, please. All right, the release form. All of you advocates must take a look at the release form before you expect a client to fill it out. The release forms are all contained on the home page of Salesforce, okay? So you go to the right, which says training links, and you scroll down and you will see a release form. And you should read it before you send it out. We're gonna look at it next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, the release form. This is a total requirement. You have to do this for every client. The client must check the boxes. A signature alone is not sufficient. There are 5 boxes. The 5th box, and you must read that, the 5th box says, I give permission to talk about my health insurance. If that 5th box is not signed, the story is unusable. We will not be able to accept it. Whether or not they sign becomes irrelevant. We need the signature. We need as many boxes checked as possible, but the 5th one is essential because without that, we cannot talk about their health insurance. The first box is the name. We urge everyone to fill in the name. Stories are hugely more usable with the name. That way, and these stories do not get shared widely. You can always reassure your clients that these stories are not going on any, you know, on the side of a bus. They're not getting blathered around everywhere. They're not going to be on the evening news. These stories are largely contained to the annual reports and to us in private meetings with other healthcare professionals, and of course, with when we're lobbying, and we'll be able to say, Congressperson Jones, I have a client in the Bronx, and listen to what happened to him, blah, 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 blah. And that's it. And the congressperson doesn't remember the name, and it just doesn't go anywhere, but it's very, very effective to be able to speak about specific people in specific areas. So that's why we want the name. If possible, if there's a medical condition, and especially now, if it's COVID-19 related, please make sure that box is checked. Next slide, please. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. The last thing there, you can go back, Catherine, if that's not too hard. One back. We need a signed release. Well, I'll just say it. Just stay. We need, the last thing says we need a signed release form from anybody quoted in the story. So please keep that in mind. If you have, you know, a husband and wife and they both talk about it, please make sure there's a release form for both of them, okay? If really there are 2 clients, or if there's a picture, we're going to need release forms for each one. Okay, next slide, please. If they don't want to check the 5th box, I told you that's essential. Encourage the client to not only check the photo box, but to submit a picture, offer to take a picture when they're in the office. Okay, that doesn't stand. Clients can be reluctant to share their names or photos when they don't know how they'll be used. Tell them CSS depends on client stories to show what we do and highlight problems in the healthcare insurance system. Their stories might appear in an internal report or in the news. Legislators like to know we're reaching people in their district. Clients are often happy to know that their story can help improve health policy. Explain to them why we need the stories. That's your best tool for getting their permission, being honest with them and saying, we're advocates, we want to help you. This is only going to help you. We don't want to hurt you. We bend over backwards not to hurt you. And so we're asking for your story and your photo only because it's going to help you in the long run, and it's not going to hurt you. Next slide. And on the release form, there's an optional section where they can write their comments, and that's very helpful because many case handlers, that way you have built-in quotes right there. If you have a very articulate clients, and many of them are, they'll write down some thoughts, and that will help you with quotes, which is not to say you shouldn't tell me what the client specifically said to you, but of course this can help when they put in comments, nice things about their experience. Next slide, please. Getting good quotes. I'm going to have to zoom through this. Great quotes about, you may write what the client said to you in conversation, even if you don't remember every word. The exact words don't matter. Just get across what they were trying to communicate. You know, the quotes should say something about how they were very frustrated at first. Something was bad. There should always be something about before and after. Before they contacted you, the quote should address how they felt and what was going on. Now, the after is what happens now. Now, how do they feel? They have, you know, you're closing a case, so a quote should say, I'm so relieved, I'm so happy, I'm grateful, whatever it is, and I will know, I will learn. I learned from my experience, and I will always understand better about deductibles in the future, etc. Next slide. Good quotes come from the heart. Here are some examples. I was so scared I would have to dip into my retirement. I worried I wouldn't be able to get treatment for my daughter. You've all heard quotes like these. These are very touching. When my plan disenrolled me without notice, I didn't know how to get the medication I desperately needed. My case handler saved my life. These are all real quotes. I just, you know, I didn't make these up, all right? So we get these all the time. Next slide, please. Getting good quotes, think before and after. Here's, you know, here are two examples. You can read them on your own, but again, people really say these things. You know, I had surgery, this is what happened. That's the first one is a surprise bill, I think. The second one is a medical necessity thing, and a second level appeal. And yeah, these are real quotes, so you can get these too. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of questions that you can ask, you know, if you want tips about what to ask a client to elicit good quotes, so that just to encourage them, okay? And try this. Some of these questions are very good. Next slide, please. Things to keep in mind. The client does not have to answer anything they don't want to. So keep that in mind. I am telling you all the reasons they should answer and they should give permission. They do not have to. They do not have to. If we can't get them to sign, forget it. If they won't check the right boxes, forget it. Not every client can be a good story, okay? So, you know, just do your best. I do think it's easier than you think, but I totally respect that clients can be, you know, are individual. And we always want to respect their wishes. Be flexible, try to accommodate the client's requests. Stories without names are less useful. Sometimes you can say, can you share your experience rather than share your story? Sometimes I'll ask people, can I please tell others what happened to you? And because what happened to you stinks and we don't want it to happen again. So if you give us permission, what we at CSS do is we want your permission to talk about this so that we can, you know, prevent it from happening to others or to you again. So very often that's an effective way to do it. Try to get at least one memorable fact. And then finally, it doesn't have to be a complicated case. A happy client who's willing to share their story is always great. Sometimes all we need is a photo and a quote. Next slide. Okay, submitting the story. This is very important, and let's do this. This is the nuts and bolts. On the when you have a case in Salesforce, this is all done through Salesforce. I've already told you where to find the release form on the home page. Now you're ready to submit the story. That means you have the release form and you're ready to write it up and submit it. So you're going to go to the case. You're going to go to the details page, and on the upper right-hand side, you're going to see a little box that says Story Management, okay? And you're going to click on Story Management. Next screen. Next screen, thank you. And once you click on that, this is what's going to appear. It's a very simple box. It's going to have 6 fields. That's the whole thing. It's just 6 fields. We're going to go through each of those 6 right now. Okay, here you can see on the screen there are 6 fields in there. Those are the 6 you're going to have to fill out. And then go ahead, Catherine, please. All right, the first field will be client issue and how handler resolved. That's where you put your story. You can put in 100 pages worth. You do not have to. But on the other hand, you may not put just 2 sentences and expect me to be happy with that. You need to tell a story, so a few paragraphs. You need to explain in your own words why the client came to you, how they heard about you, what was the issue, and how did you solve it? Tell us details. What exactly happened? What did you do? How long did it take? Did you have to make phone calls, or did you do emails? Did you, on the old days, did you go visit the client? Did they have to come to your office? These are all special circumstances now, so you talk about that. The current circumstances are very much part of the story these days, so you're going to have to include that. The financial or emotional challenges that the client faced, you have to talk about that. That's part of the story. Next slide. And continuing, were there any language barriers, medical conditions, immigration issues? Not all of these are relevant, but please tell us what was going on when you were handling the case, the kinds of issues that came up. Provide personal details about the clients. I'm always saying that. Put in something that's interesting. If they mention to you in passing that they were in a bike marathon, you know, that they're amazing bike riders, put that in. You know, anything you know like that can be very interesting. If the case doesn't include a birthday, try to give us an age range. You know, just tell us they're in their 20s, 30s, they're middle-aged. They, you know, whatever it is, they just graduated from college, some kind of sense of age. Location, we really like to know if they live in a remote location or if they're in a very crowded apartment at a 5th floor walk-up. These factors very much affect ability to access healthcare. So do refer to location if you know anything about it. Next slide, please. Quotes, we discussed this before. And, you know, try to remember what the client said. When the client is talking, very often you will remember, even if you don't remember the exact words, you'll remember something that they said to you that struck you, that was interesting. You can ask them, you know, I want to write this up. Remind me what you said about how you felt about when you got that rejection letter. What were you saying? How did you feel when you got the rejection letter? And then maybe you'll get a good quote from them that way, because they'll tell you about why the rejection letter made no sense and how you, their advocate, finally made sense of that denial letter and helped them fix the problem. Okay, next slide, please. Photo. If you get a photo, you just check the box. You're not going to actually enter it. You're not going to submit the photo yet. Photos are hugely important. Among other things, the annual report, we almost only include stories with photos, and we love to be able to include good stories in the annual report. And frankly, I can't tell you how much lawmakers and funders prefer stories with photos. They're not going to go anywhere. No one's keeping them. But for the 1 minute that they're focusing, when they see a picture, it makes a world of a difference. And it doesn't have to be a great picture. Anything will do. Clients sometimes worry that supplying a photo will hurt them. Please reassure them that we treat photos and all personal documents with sensitivity and respect. We bend over backwards to act in our clients' best interests. Please tell them. I know you all pay a huge amount of attention to their privacy, and we at CSS, we turn somersaults trying to respect their concerns. So any photo, we are so aware of how precious that is, and please explain that to them, that we really are, and they can trust us. If they trust you, you know, we support you, and we absolutely want to be able to do right by your clients. Next slide, please. And therefore, give us photos. All right. The fifth box I said must be checked. Now the next field on Salesforce is going to be what permissions did the client grant. So remember, there are 5 of them: name, age, photograph, medical condition, and insurance coverage issues. The 5th one is the only hard rule requirement. The 5th one has to be checked. All the others are optional, but highly, highly desired. Next slide, please. HIPAA authorization expiration date. If the client does not put in an expiration date, we automatically get 7 years. That is our preference. Please, all of you, please read that form, because you can't expect the client to understand it if you don't. The client needs to understand that it's best if they leave the expiration date blank. If they leave it blank, it's better for us. If they insist on putting in an expiration date, make sure it's at least 2 years from now. Otherwise, it's not very usable. So we request at least 2 years. Next slide, please. Would speak to a reporter. This is a very rare, a relatively rare thing. I will not. It does come up. You know, many of you have gotten calls from me saying, you know, I have a case. I'm thinking this might be go to a reporter. What do you think? But we always ask, if the client says, yes, I would speak to a reporter, please reassure them. It doesn't mean anything's going to happen. You know, it means 9 out of 10 of them, more, you know, 95% of them are never going to hear another word. And the few who do hear something, it's not going to be directly from the reporter. It's going to be me or another CSS person saying, this came up. Can I give your name to this reporter? So at that point, they can say no. Plus, if and when a reporter calls them, they can say, you know, I want to hear more. I want to hear more about your story, you know, what you plan to do with it. And then if the reporter doesn't answer to the satisfaction, then they just say, no, thanks. So again, speaking to a reporter does not mean that they're going to be in a newspaper article or on TV. It just means they'd entertain the notion. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now you've hit next. After you enter all those 6, after you do the reporter question, that's the 6th field, you hit next, and then the next box appears. This box is the story confirmation page. And that's pretty much just going to show you what you just entered. And that's where you can edit. So you'll just edit, you'll quickly look at all 6 fields, you'll make sure you did the right thing. And then you'll do next. So you click next, and let's go to the next slide, please. And after you click the story confirmation page, you're going to get a box that says upload attachments. That is where you're going to upload hopefully a photo and definitely a release form, okay? And the release forms are required. I should mention that you can go ahead, Salesforce will allow you to hit next without any attachments. That's a difference from how it used to be on the portal. I believe you can hit next even if you don't have an attachment. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure. However, be aware that if you hit next and there is no attachment, your story is not going to be accepted. Sometimes you might say to me, you know, Miriam, I sent it without an attachment, but I promise I'll get it to you in 2 weeks. That's fine, okay? But otherwise, be aware we will not accept stories without release forms. Next slide. Once you have submitted your release form and hopefully a photo, you'll get a success screen, and that means you click finish, you've done it, and you'll see on that box it says click, thank you, your story has been submitted. Click here to view your story bank record. So that's where you can click right there to see it. And the Salesforce will assign a story number, which will be permanently attached to the case. Next slide. Now this is important. Viewing and editing your story after you have submitted it. Many, many times I will come back to you with questions. I will say, okay, I'm confused about XYZ, please clarify. In order to get back into this story, what you need to do is go to that page, and this could be a week from now, or it could be 6 months from now. The story, once you've submitted it, is permanent, and you can always change the story. Whether or not a case is open or closed is irrelevant. You do not need to worry if a case is closed, but I say to you, I need some kind of change on the story, or I need you to look at the story. Just go to the case, whether it's open or closed, go to the related page, scroll to the very bottom of the related page, and you will see a link to your story. On the bottom is a screenshot. That's what you will see on the very bottom. So you can always find your story afterwards. So you're going to scroll there, you'll see a link, you click on the link, you make the changes. In order to upload documents, like let's say you say, oh, I couldn't believe it, I got a photo at the last minute. How do I do that? So if you got a photo at the last minute, you go to the story, you go, and when you go on the story, you go on the related page. The related page of the story, remember in Salesforce, there's always a details page and a related page. So you have to go to the related page of the case in order to find your links to the story. And once you're on the story, you have to go to the related tab in order to upload documents. It's really pretty simple, but you just have to remember these things, that the story is different from the case. The story, you always have to make changes in the story, not the case. You have to add release forms and photos to the story, not the case. Many people enter it in the case by mistake. Now, I think there's one more slide. Let's take a look, but I also want to mention about release forms. This is important since most of you have been successfully sending me signed release forms, which I really appreciate. I've gotten some very nice stories. I've gotten fewer stories in the since the pandemic began. I understand that. I'm hoping that will increase, but I understand the challenges are huge, and it's harder to get to write stories and to get signed release forms. Some of you have had a real struggle getting signed release forms because your clients may not have a printer, don't know how to scan, etc. There are workarounds. What we've been doing with some people is we will accept an email where you'll email them the release form, and then you'll ask them in an email back. They can say, yes, I give permission to CSS and to its agency to talk about my story, and I agree to all 5 boxes, or something like that. Or yes, I give permission, but I do not want my photo used, that kind of thing. So it's because of COVID-19, we've been making that exception, but that's not, ideal, and you would eventually have to get a signed form. We are also in the process of making changes on Salesforce, and within a few weeks, we hope to have a feature on Salesforce where you will be able to have the documents sign online. It's similar to DocuSign, if some of you know that, or it's similar to Adobe Fill and Sign, where where you can get something to the client, and the client can just directly sign something online and will not need, so we wouldn't need printed versions. Okay, finally, after you submit your story, you may receive questions from the manager. That's me. I will let you know. I usually do, I assign new tasks through Salesforce, and you'll get the task, and you have to get back to me, and you can, get back to me. I'm often available by phone. I'm very, very receptive to questions, to hand-holding if you need it. Just make sure to contact me, ask me your questions, and try to answer my questions as best you can. And I think that may be all. Next slide, please. Here are 2 story examples. Because in the interest of time, I do not think I will go through these, but these are examples of stories that we wrote up. You can see many other stories at the annual report. I should also mention there is a tip sheet. You're all going to get copies of this training, but there's my phone number, and there's also a tip sheet that I believe that Nakia or Catherine is going to be sending out. We've revised the tip sheet. It's like only 1.5 pages long, and it summarizes everything here. So I would suggest that you remember that there's a tip sheet when, you know, read it through. And whenever you're about to do a story, if you're getting rusty, take a look at it. So thank you very much. In a nutshell, I think you guys do great work. I'm passionate about what you do. Your stories move me hugely. You do really the Lord's work, so many of you. And the more you can tell us about your hard work, the better it is for all of us, okay? Are there any questions?
Thanks, Miriam. Oh yeah, go ahead. I think someone has a question. Or was that you, Miriam?
I'm right here. I don't see a question.
Yeah, I don't see questions either. Oh wait, I think a question came in. Does the case have to be open to submit a story?
No, this is a real advantage that people often think that you have the case, oh, well, how am I going to do it? The case can be closed. There will still be a case, but you're not changing the case because you're going to a link on the case. You're going to go to the case, you're going to go to the related page, and you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and there'll be a link to the story. The story you can always edit because we don't close stories, okay?
Great. Thank you so much, Miriam, for this
Thank
training.
you, Catherine. Thank you, everybody. Please, I'm available. I hope this helped, and I look forward to getting more terrific stories from many of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.